Should reflect that the jury has joined us again. Welcome back, members of the jury. Folks, to accommodate someone's schedule and without objection, the prosecution is going to interrupt the testimony of Dr. Lear call, and they are going to call a different witness at this time. All right, go ahead.
Your Honor, the people call Kevin Quinones.
Good afternoon, sir. Could I have you raise your right hand so that I can administer an oath? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Please be seated. Please tell us your full name and spell your first, middle, and last names.
Kevin Quinones, spelled K-E-V-E-N, last name Q-U-I-N-O-N-E-Z.
Ms. Pearson, you may proceed.
Mr. Quinones, did you go to see The Dark Knight Rises at the Century 16 Theater on July 19th of 2012?
I did.
And that's the movie that started at 12:05 a.m. on the 20th, actually?
It is.
Who did you go to the movies with?
Brittany Deemer,
Do you recall what time you got to the theater?
11:30ish.
When you went in to look for seats, was the theater crowded at that point?
Very.
Did you have difficulty finding seats?
No, we found some pretty quickly. We looked up and there was, on the left-hand side, a couple of seats left, so we got lucky.
Were you there prior to the time that the preview started?
Yeah, like 11:45 was when we were actually inside of the theaters, around that time.
And the preview started did they start at 12:05?
I'm sure they were on, but I don't think I was paying attention.
Once the movie started, did something happen while you were watching the movie?
Yes.
And how long into the movie do you think that was?
38 minutes.
From after midnight?
Yes, 12:38.
What happened?
At some point there was something was thrown into the air. It was like a canister, and it was hissing in the air, and I saw it fly in front of the screen, and then it fell, and a couple of seconds later it popped, and I heard someone scream, and then shortly after that I looked down and I saw like the figure of a man walking with sort of a kind of holding something, sort of like a shotgun, and I saw flashes coming from his direction, like bright white orange flash, and it sounded like a shotgun. And so I got on top of my girlfriend and I took cover under the seats with her, and then we just heard gunshots after that.
What did this person look like that you saw?
It looked like they were wearing some sort of gear, about 5'9", kind of big.
Could you see a face?
No, but I saw a mask.
A mask covering the face?
Covering the face, yes.
Do you recall what color the clothing was that the person was wearing?
No, it was too dark to tell.
Was it light clothing, dark clothing?
Dark.
What happened next?
At some point, the firing ended, and I looked up, and there was smoke in the air everywhere, and there was people on the floor coughing, kind of crawling, and so that's when I decided that we needed to get up and get out of there. So we stood up and we ran up the stairs of the theater to the top, and then we took an exit, the back exit, and we exited through there, and from there's a balcony that oversees Century 16's lobby, and there's stairs that you go down, and so we went down those stairs, and there was people running down with us, and some people were bloodied, some people were coughing, some people were on their phones calling 911, and we were running out and going to the car, and so we got to the car, and we drove out of the parking lot, and as we were driving out of the parking lot, our police department cars were coming into the movie theater, and we were leaving. And so we left the theater, and then we took
At some point, did you make contact with the Aurora Police Department?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I left that part out. I'm sorry. I did contact the Aurora Police Department during the shooting that was occurring. While I was on top of Brittany covering her and covering ourselves from the bullets, I called 911 and just told them what was going on, or what I thought was going on, and they asked for an address, and couldn't really give it to them, but I think eventually enough 911 calls got made to figure out what was going on.
Your Honor, may I approach with People's Exhibit 1157 and 1024?
Yes.
Turning first to the Exhibit 1157, the drawing, do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
Is that a diagram of the theater that you drew on?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I'd move for the admittance of People's Exhibit 1157.
Any objection?
No objection.
Without objection, P-TR-1157 is admitted.
Now, I've also handed you a CD, Exhibit 1024. Do you recognize that particular CD?
I do.
How do you recognize it?
My name is on it, and the date is on it, and I've signed it.
And your signature and the date that you listened to it is on there?
Yes.
And is that a copy of the 911 call that you made?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I'd move for the admittance of People's Exhibit 1024.
Is there any additional objection or any objection?
There is an objection, Your Honor. May we approach briefly?
Yes. All right, the exhibit is admitted, so P-TR-1024 is admitted, and both exhibits may be published.
Could I have 1157 up first, please? Now, there, I believe, is a mouse there that will actually work on that screen. And did you note where you were sitting in this theater?
Right around there. I'm sorry,
In
it won't stay still. But right there, right about there.
And that would be on the right side of the theater as you were facing the screen?
Yes.
Now, you indicated you saw a canister being thrown or something like that?
Yeah.
And where did you see it come from, if you can point to on your diagram?
So there's some labels here. C1 is where the canister began.
And if you could put the cursor down on that?
Yeah. So there's C1 right there.
And
So
what-
that's where I assume it came from, but I did see it fly over here. I'm sorry,
And where did you
over
see
this
it?
direction like that. And I could see it from where I'm sitting right there. And so right there is where I think it landed, because that's where I heard it explode, and that's where I heard it scream.
And where did you see the person in dark clothing that was holding something that looked like a gun to you?
So see down here, key, where it says S equals shooter, S is right there. So that's where I saw the figure of a man kind of holding a shotgun.
Did you ever see him at any other location in the theater?
No, because I got down.
Thank you. Now, when you called 911, at that time in the theater, were gunshots still going on?
Yes.
Do you know how long you've been hearing gunshots?
No, I honestly cannot remember.
And I'll approach to retrieve that disc.
Yes, you may approach.
Thank you. And I would move to publish it to the jury at this point.
That request is granted, and my court reporter is not going to take down the audio.
No.
Thank you.
Hello, 911, where's your emergency? I can't hear you. What address? Theater, Colorado. Yeah, sir, I can't hear you. Give me the address again. There's gunshots. What address? Say it loud.
The record should reflect that the people just finished publishing Exhibit P-TR-1024.
Now, we could hear on this recording what sounded like gunshots in the background. How loud was this in the theater for you?
Very loud, echoing, actually.
Was it hard to hear talking on the phone?
Yeah, pretty hard.
Thank you. I don't have any more questions.
Any cross-examination?
No, thank you.
All right. And the jury does not appear to have any questions. May this witness be released from his subpoena, Ms. Pearson?
Yes, Your Honor, he may.
Any objection?
No objection.
All right, sir, thank you. All right, Ms. Pearson, do you want to resume your direct examination of Dr. Lear Cole at this time?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Doctor, welcome back. I'll remind you that you're still under oath, okay? All right. Ms. Pearson, you may proceed.
Dr. Learcall, when we broke, we had finished with the first autopsy that you did on July 20th of 2012. Did you do a second autopsy during the afternoon of that same day?
Yes, I did.
Who did you do the second autopsy on?
The second autopsy was done on John Larimer,
And do you recall what time that began?
2:20 p.m.
Was his body x-rayed in the manner that you've previously described?
Yes, it was.
I'm going to hand you what have been marked as People's Exhibits 2519, 2614, 2615, 2616, 2617, 2618, 2619, basically 2614 to 2619 inclusive, as well as 3065, 3066, 3067, 3068, and 3069. Do you recognize all of those photographs?
Yes, I do.
And are all of those photographs from the autopsy of John Larimer?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, I would move for admittance of all the photographs that I've tendered to the witness.
No additional objection.
All right, there are no additional objections, so based on my rulings in amended order D98B, P-TR-2519, 2614 through 2619 inclusive, and 3065 through 3069 inclusive are admitted and may be published.
If I could have 2519 first, please. And I think we've fixed the mouse. If you could tell us what this is a photograph of.
So this is a photograph of the pictures of the x-rays of John Larimer that were taken prior to autopsy.
2614.
So this photograph is the x-ray of predominantly his abdomen towards the top. You can see his ribs, and towards the bottom, his pelvic bones. So this is essentially a x-ray of his abdomen. You can see one small fragment. I can almost get the arrow to go to. That's the largest fragment. There are a couple even smaller fragments of bullet that are visible, but these are magnified on the x-ray, so they're very small pieces.
2615, please.
Again, this is the same area, an x-ray of his abdomen. It's moved over a little bit just so that you can see his entire torso or abdomen is included. That left side wasn't quite as visible on the previous x-ray.
2616.
This is an x-ray that includes his arm and hand. Again, we take x-rays of all areas where there's a gunshot wound. Sometimes we have to repeat them, so this x-ray is not very clear, and you'll see better in a later x-ray.
2617.
So this is an x-ray of his arm. You can see it's actually oriented upside down, so his hand would be towards the top and his elbow towards the bottom. But this is his forearm. And right here, you can see a fracture. There's two bones in the forearm, and this one is fractured. You can see that the ends don't quite line up right where that arrow is.
2618.
This is an x-ray of the chest. So we saw the abdomen, now we're seeing the chest moving a little bit further up, and there are no fragments of bullet to see on this photograph.
2619.
Again, this is just a second x-ray of his chest and part of his abdomen. There's also part of his left arm in that photograph as well.
Did you do an external exam as part of the autopsy?
Yes, I did.
What injuries did you observe on the external exam?
So on the external exam, there were a total of 6 gunshot wounds. They included 2 on the right side of his torso or trunk, 1 on the left side of his body, 1 on his back, and 2 on his right arm.
And if you could look at the photos, please, if we could first have 3065. And are these photos from the autopsy?
Yes, they are.
Is this John Larimer?
Yes, it is.
3066. What do we see in this photograph?
So this is a photograph taken at the time of autopsy to show 2 of his wounds. This wound here is a gunshot wound. It's on the right lower chest to abdomen, so the right lower side of his body. The other wound we see is on basically his right elbow. It's a little bit below his elbow, but on the right side of on the back side of his right forearm. So those are 2 gunshot wounds that we can see in this photograph.
3067.
This injury here that we can see, this is the left side of his body, so now we're looking at him from the other side. This is the left side of his body. This is also a gunshot wound. It's a little bit bigger and more irregular. a little bit more atypical, if you will, but it is, in fact, a gunshot wound, again, on his left, the side of his chest.
3068.
So we've moved back to the right side of his body, and up here towards his armpit on the right axillary chest is another gunshot wound. So again, this is a small defect that you can see, but that is, in fact, a gunshot wound.
3069.
So this is his left wrist. You can see, obviously, his left hand and the front side of his left wrist. This is, as we discussed in the previous case, a shrapnel-type injury, not a classic gunshot wound, but an injury caused by something going through his skin in that area.
Did you then do an internal exam?
Yes, I did.
And you can take that down. What did you discover on the internal exam portion of the autopsy?
So internally, I discovered that the wound on his back, there was a wound in the middle of his back, I don't believe we saw a photograph of that one, went through his right chest and exited through his right armpit. So that photograph we saw on the right armpit was the exit, and that wound injured his right lung. I also saw that the wound on the left side of his lower chest was an entrance wound, and it connected to the wound on the right lower side of his chest to abdomen. So that wound tracked connected. It injured his liver, his pancreas, small bowel, and his aorta and vena cava, and those are the blood vessels that take blood to and from the lower half of the body, basically. That wound also re-entered his forearm, so if looking at his body, his forearm entrance wound connected right up with the wound on the right side of his body, which then exited through that injury near his elbow. So that's what we call a re-entry and re-exit wound as it goes through and through the body.
Were you able to determine the path that the bullets took through his body?
Yes, I was.
And would using the mannequin assist in describing those paths?
Yes.
And if we could get that back up again.
So the wound that we saw on the left side of his body was here again towards the left side of his lower chest. The exit was again on the right side, so this was predominantly going from his left to his right, slightly downward, but at that type of an angle, so very, very much left to right. Again, that went right through his forearm. You can see as it went out of the right side of his body, it would have gone into the right forearm and then exited the back side of that forearm. Again, it's just to demonstrate not necessarily exactly the same dimensions, but that's the type of thing we're talking about. And then the other injury was on his back. If we can spin him around, he had an entrance wound that was towards the midline or towards the spine of the back, just slightly to the right. It went in that area and came out in his right, I think if we turn it this way a little bit, came out, as we saw, near his right armpit. So again, if the entrance is over here and the exit's here, that's going very much left to right and back to front, because it's more towards his back, towards his front, and upward, so the entrance is lower than the exit, so it's moving upward.
So he had entrance wounds that were both on his front and the back part of his body?
On the left side and his back.
Could you tell whether a rifle, a shotgun, or a pistol bullet caused his injuries?
It was not consistent with a shotgun, but other than that, there were no fragments of bullet recovered or nothing else that would indicate whether it was a handgun or a rifle.
Were you able to determine a cause and manner of death for John Larimer?
Yes, his cause of death was 2 perforating gunshot wounds of the trunk.
And in your opinion, is that what killed him?
Yes, it is.
Did you do a third autopsy on July 20th of 2012?
Yes, I did.
Whose autopsy was that?
That was Jesse Childress.
What time did you do that autopsy?
That was at 4:40 in the afternoon.
And as with the other autopsies, did you x-ray his body?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, I'm going to approach the witness with People's Exhibits 2516, 2609, 2610, 2611, 3070, 3071, and 3072.
You may.
Have you had a chance to review those?
Yes.
And are those photographs of x-rays and photographs that were taken during the autopsy of Jesse Childress?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, I'd move for admittance of the exhibits that I've tendered to the witness.
No additional objections.
Are all of these pictures subject to my ruling?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, based on my rulings and given the fact that there are no additional objections, P-TR-2516, 2609 through 2611 inclusive, and 3070 through 3072 inclusive are admitted and may be published. And my ruling was in order amended D98B.
If I could first have up 2516. What are we looking at in this particular photograph?
Again, these are the overall views of the x-rays, photographs of the x-rays that were taken of Jesse Childress.
2609? What do we see?
So this is an x-ray of the right side of his body and his right arm. You can see within the upper arm here, and then on the right side of his body, you can see small pellets. So these are radiopaque shotgun pellets that show up on the x-ray.
2610?
So this is an x-ray of his chest. So again, you can see his ribs to give some orientation, but these are, again, multiple small pellets that you can see consistent with the shotgun pellets.
And 2611?
So this is an x-ray of his abdomen and pelvis. Again, what's notable are several shotgun pellets visible on the x-ray.
Did you do an external exam on Jesse Childress?
Yes, I did.
What did you observe about him?
So on external exam, he had multiple small round defects consistent with a shotgun wound. So when we're dealing with a shotgun wound, it's a little bit different than a solid bullet because there are multiple pellets that come out. So he had multiple pellet defects or shotgun pellet wounds that were concentrated on his left shoulder and left chest, but really he had them on his abdomen, on his upper legs, on his left hand as well. They were concentrated on the left side of his body and his left shoulder.
And if we could see photograph 3070. If you can tell us what we're seeing here.
This is a photograph of Jesse Childress to show his identifying facial features. It does show some of the injuries, but this photograph is predominantly to identify who we're looking at.
3071.
So this photograph is from the autopsy. It's taken from the left side, and you can see on, as I said, on his left shoulder and left chest, all of these round shotgun pellet defects. You can also see some down here further on his lower chest to abdomen, and some across the front or anterior surface of his chest as well.
3072?
So this is a photograph obviously taken from above to show some of these other injuries. It does show how they're more on the left side, so his left shoulder, but again, on his abdomen you can see several injuries, and over here on the left side of his upper leg to thigh, you can see some injuries as well.
Did you do an internal exam?
Yes, I did.
And what did you discover during the internal exam portion of the autopsy?
So on the internal exam, there were multiple pellets that were recovered. So he had, as we saw in the x-ray, numerous small shotgun pellets. They had injured both of his lungs. They had injured his heart, his aorta, and his liver. Those were the internal organs and structures that were most affected. The pellets are not all recovered. I do recover what I can, but some of them are not recovered. But those are the internal injuries that I saw.
And were you able to determine the path of his injuries?
So the path of these injuries is a little bit different just because we're talking about a shotgun, so there's some spread of the pellets. Most of them were from left to right.
And would the mannequin assist?
Yes. So most of, as we saw in the photographs, most of the injuries were on the left shoulder, but some of them were on the abdomen and some of them were on the legs. Many of them, as I said, were going somewhat left to right, but the ones on the upper portion were going downward, and the injuries on the lower portion of his body were traveling upward. So it indicates that, you know, in his body it looks like they're going different directions. But again, it means he probably wasn't standing straight when the pellets impacted him. So some of them were going more downward and some of them were going more upward.
Based on the directionality you saw, what could you tell about his body position at the time that he was shot?
It's most consistent with him being in some sort of a bent over position. I don't know, if he was crouching, if he was running, if he was moving, or still, but it looks like as the pellets are coming, in order for them to be going in those directions, he has to be bent over in some way, so that these are coming down and these are coming up, although they're all coming the same direction, if that makes sense.
Were you able to determine what kind of gun caused his injuries?
Shotgun.
And were you able to determine a cause and manner of death for Jesse Childress?
His cause of death was a penetrating shotgun wound of the trunk and extremities.
And is that your opinion of what killed him?
Yes.
Did you do any more autopsies on Friday, July 20th?
No.
Did you do additional autopsies on Saturday, July 21st?
Yes.
Who is the person that you did the first autopsy on in the morning of July 21st?
The first autopsy was performed on Jonathan Blunk.
What time did you begin that autopsy?
That was started at 9:50 in the morning.
Did you x-ray his body as you had the other?
Yes, I did.
And take photographs?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm going to hand the witness what have been marked as People's Exhibits 2514, 2604, 2605, 3073, and 3074. Do you recognize all of these photographs?
Yes, I do.
Your Honor, I would move for the admittance of the photographs I've tendered to the witness.
Any objection?
No additional objections.
All right, without any additional objection, and based on my previous rulings in order D, amended D98B, People's Exhibits P-TR-2514, 2604, 2605, 3073, and 3074 are admitted.
Could I have 2514, please? What is,
So this is a photograph of the overview of the x-rays that were taken of Jonathan Blanc.
2604?
This is a photograph of the x-ray of his chest.
Now, there are
There's-
a number of items in here that almost look like the back end of a bullet, but is in fact that not the case?
That's correct. So most of what we're seeing here are actually snaps or buttons on his shirt. All the x-rays are done before anything else, so they are still clothed at the time. So most of what we're seeing here are snaps from his shirt. But also what we see, this is just a piercing jewelry. But next to this, this fragment on the left side, the right side of his body, left side of the screen, and this second triangular shaped fragment, those are both fragments of bullet.
Could I have 2605?
Again, this is just another view of the same x-ray. The first one was a little bit better because the bullets weren't quite over as far to the side, but we take as many as we take to get what we need.
Did you do an external exam on Jonathan Blanc?
Yes, I did.
What injuries did you observe?
So he had 2 gunshot wounds, one on his back around his shoulder blade on the left side, and one involving his left ear.
And did you also take photographs?
Yes.
If we could have 3073. Is this an identifying photograph?
Yes, it is.
And is this Jonathan Blanc?
Yes, it is.
3074, please.
So this photograph shows both the injuries. The main injury that is pretty obvious is the gunshot wound on the left side of his back. There's a large gunshot wound defect surrounded by abrasions, which we call pseudo-stippling. That's where fragments of foreign material strike the skin and leave these abrasions. So that's one wound. The second wound that we see involves his left ear, and it's not a close-up view, but I think you can probably make out that there's a red area towards the top of his ear, and that's the second gunshot wound.
You can take that down. Now, you talked about pseudo-stippling and foreign material getting
Yes.
into a wound. What do you mean by foreign material?
So if a bullet passes through what we call an intermediary object, meaning the bullet goes through something else before it strikes the skin, it often can carry fragments of that material along with it. So if the bullet goes through a wall or a seat or a car door in certain examples, it can carry fragments of wood or metal or plaster, other things along with it. And if those carry far enough, they'll strike the skin. In this case, we see those pseudo-stipples or abrasions surrounding the entrance wound that are very irregular, multiple different shapes, just indicating that foreign material struck that area.
When you were doing the autopsy, did you in fact recover some of that foreign material?
Yes, I did.
Did you do an internal exam?
Yes, I did.
What did you discover during the internal exam?
During the internal exam, I discovered that this wound on his back traveled through both chest cavities, so it injured both his right and his left lungs, as well as his aorta. And there were 2 fragments of bullet, as we saw in the autopsy, that were within the skin of his right chest wall. So the right side of his chest, there were 2 fragments of the bullet. Looking at his head, there was a gunshot wound of his ear. On internal exam, I found a small fragment of bullet in his scalp, directly underneath that. This was not a classic gunshot wound in that the intact bullet had gone through. It was just a fragment of a bullet that was probably, again, you might call it shrapnel, but it was identifiable as a piece of a bullet that struck his ear. It did not go through his skull or injure his brain at all.
Could you tell what type of firearm caused his injuries?
The injury of his chest, so the gunshot wound of his chest, was a rifle bullet that was recovered. The injury on his head, the fragment was small enough to not be determinable.
And were you able to determine paths of bullets in his body?
Yes,
Would the mannequin assist you in describing that?
yes.
If we could approach that.
Yes.
Turn him. So the entrance was on, again, his left shoulder. We saw in the photographs a little bit below his shoulder blade, but on the left side of his back. And then the bullet itself is recovered from just the front side of his body. I could actually see a bruise on his skin from where the bullet was underneath that. So if you think about it going from here over to here, that's very much, again, from his left to his right, from his back to his front. And I believe it also went slightly upward. The wound of his ear, again, it didn't really go into his head at all. It went through his ear and just struck his skull. So it was predominantly left to right, but didn't go that far internally.
In your opinion, what killed Jonathan Blunk?
His cause of death was a perforating gunshot wound of the chest. I'm sorry, penetrating gunshot wound of the chest.
And the manner of death?
Was homicide.
Did you do another autopsy on July 21st?
Yes, I did.
Who was the person that you did the next autopsy on?
The next autopsy was performed on Alex Sullivan, and that was started at noon.
Did you x-ray his body?
Yes, I did.
And did you take photographs?
Yes, I did.
I'm going to hand you what have been marked as People's Exhibits 2525, 2594, 2595, 2596, 2597, 3079, 3080, and 3081.
Ms. Pearson, could you read those numbers again, please?
2525, 2594, 2595, 2596, 2597, and 3079, 3080, and 3081. So 2594 through 2597, 2525, and then 3079 through 3081.
Thank you.
Do you recognize all of these photographs?
Yes, I do.
And are they photographs of x-rays and photographs taken during the autopsy of Alex Sullivan?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, I'd move for the admittance of those.
Any objection?
No additional objections.
All right, with no additional objection and based on my rulings in amended order D98B, exhibits P-TR 2525, P-TR-2525, I should have said, and 2594 through 2597 inclusive, as well as 3079 through 3081 inclusive, are admitted and may be published.
Could I have 2525, please? What is this photograph of?
So this is the overall photograph of the 4 x-rays that were taken of Alex Sullivan.
2594?
This is a photograph of the x-ray of his chest. You can see up at the top, this is a necklace that he was wearing, but there's no other, some very, very small fragments, but no intact bullet or large fragments of bullet.
2595?
This is an X-ray of the abdomen, the lower part of his chest and his abdomen. Again, there's no bullets or other fragments on this X-ray.
2596?
This is just a clearer view of his abdomen because the last one had some artifact there, but this is, again, an X-ray of his abdomen with no fragments of bullet or intact bullets.
And 2597?
This is, again, you can see it's his abdomen and his pelvis. It also has his arm in that screen, just because that's the position that his body was in when it was X-rayed.
Now, we didn't see, you can take that down, we didn't see any bullets or fragments on any of these X-rays were any recovered in his autopsy.
No.
Did you do an external exam?
Yes.
What did you observe?
So on external exam, he had 2 gunshot wounds, one in his, on the right lateral side of his chest, and one basically on the upper part of his lower neck to upper chest.
And could I have 3079, please?
So this is, again, the identifying photograph so that we can see that this is indeed Alex Sullivan.
3080?
This is a photograph of the gunshot wound that, again, was on the lower part of his neck to upper part of his chest, basically in that little defect right above the breastbone.
And is that his neck to the right of the photograph?
That's his neck to the right, so his head would be to the right, his feet would be to the left as you're looking at the photograph.
3081?
So this is the right side of his body. You can see his armpit there at the left side of the photograph. His head would be to the left, his feet to the right. This again is a gunshot wound that's there on the right side of his chest.
And you can take that down. Did you do an internal exam?
Yes, I did.
And what did you discover during the internal exam?
So the internal exam revealed that the bullet passed through his right axillary chest. It went through his liver, his right lung, and his heart, and then exited on his neck to upper chest, as we saw in the photographs.
Would it assist to use the mannequin to show the path that the bullet took through his body?
Yes.
If we could approach that.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we can leave him. I think everybody can see that his right axillary area or his armpit area, and then here is where we're seeing that exit. So as it goes through his body, it's going right to left, it's going upward, and it's going a little bit back to front, but predominantly right to left and upward as it travels through his body.
Thank you. Were you able to tell what kind of a gun caused his injuries?
No, there were no missiles recovered, no bullets recovered, and nothing particular about the wound.
In your opinion, what killed Alex Sullivan?
He died of a perforating gunshot wound of the chest.
And were you able to determine the manner of death?
It's homicide.
Did you do a 6th autopsy on July 21st?
Yes, I did.
And who was that?
That was Michaela Medic.
What time did you begin that autopsy?
That autopsy was started at 1:50 in the afternoon.
Did you x-ray her body and take photographs consistent with what you do at all autopsies?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, I'm going to hand the witness what have been marked as People's Exhibits 2522, 2601, 2602, 3082, 3083, and 3084.
All right.
Do you recognize all of those photographs?
Yes, I do.
And are they photographs taken at the autopsy of Michaela Medic?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, I'd move for admittance of the photographs I've tendered to the witness.
Any objection?
No additional objections.
All right, without any additional objection, and based on my rulings in order amended D98B, P-TR-2522, 2601, 2602, and 3082 through 3084 inclusive are admitted and may be published.
Could I have 2522, please?
So this is the overall view of the two x-rays that were performed on Michaela Medic.
2601.
This is an x-ray of her head. There's no bullets or bullet fragments that are identifiable in this photograph.
2602.
So this is a photograph of the x-ray of her chest. There's a few different things we see in here, mostly clothing related. You can see some snaps and a zipper. But there are 3 fragments of bullet. One here on the on the right side of the photograph as you look. A second piece here towards the middle. You can just see it next to the wire that's visible, but there is a little triangle that's a piece of the bullet. And then the third is this rectangular fragment that's seen on her right side, but the left side of the photograph that we're looking at.
You can take that down. Did you do an external exam?
Yes, I did.
What injuries did you observe?
So the primary injury was a gunshot wound that was on her left lateral back, again towards her shoulder blade.
Could I have 3082, please?
This is the identifying photograph that shows that this is Michaela Medic.
3083.
This is a photograph of the wound on the left side of her back. She is slightly rolled, but this is the gunshot wound. It's slightly atypical in that it is elongated rather than more round, and there is a hemorrhage or bleeding surrounding the wound.
3084.
This is the same wound, a little bit closer up so you can kind of see the irregularity and the bleeding surrounding that wound, but this is the entrance gunshot wound, and again, that is her left back. She's slightly tipped over, so her arm would be reaching up towards the top of that photograph.
And you can take that down. Did you do an internal exam?
Yes, I did.
What did you discover during the internal exam?
So during the internal exam, I found that the gunshot wound entered her left back, passed through both of her chest cavities, injuring both of her lungs and her heart. A piece of the bullet went into her spinal column, so the bone of her spine did not injure her spinal cord, but went into the bone, her vertebral body of the spine. And I found 3 fragments of bullet that we saw in the x-ray. One was in the left chest cavity, one was in the right chest cavity, and that small triangular piece was within the bone.
Were you able to tell what kind of a gun caused her injuries?
These were fragments of a rifle bullet.
And would it assist to use the mannequin to show the path that the bullet took in
Yes.
her body?
Yes?
So this, I guess we need to see the backside. So she's has an entrance wound on the left back, turning it just a little bit more, towards her shoulder, kind of between her shoulder blade and the actual shoulder itself. So the entrance wound is here. The bullet goes through her chest cavities. One of the bullet fragments is in her spine, so you can see that it's going from her left to her right, traveling through very little frontward or backward deviation, but traveling slightly downward, but predominantly left to right.
In your opinion, what killed Michaela Medic?
She died of a penetrating gunshot wound of the chest.
And were you able to determine the manner of death?
Manner of death was homicide.
Thank you. I don't have any more questions.
Is there any cross-examination?
No, sir, there's not.
All right. And the jury does not appear to have any questions for this witness. Ms. Pearson, may this witness be released from her subpoena?
She may.
Any objection?
No objection.
All right. Thank you, doctor. All right, members of the jury, it's almost 4:45, and so we're going to go ahead and adjourn a little bit early. I'm going to give you the advisements in full because we are breaking for 4 days. As you know, Monday is Memorial Day, and so I want to emphasize how extremely important these advisements are and how we are relying on you to comply with each and every one of them. So let me go through these again. Number one, please do not discuss any aspect of the case with each other through any means. You're free to talk to each other, but not about the case. I know that sometimes it may be tempting to want to talk about what's going on in the proceedings. You have to resist that temptation. You have to avoid talking about any aspect of the case, as well as any aspect of your role as a juror or your service as a juror. You can talk about whatever else you may wish to talk about, your jobs, your family, whatever you're comfortable with, just nothing related to the case. Number two, please do not discuss the case with anyone else through any means. That includes your spouse or significant other. I know how difficult that is. I know what it is we're asking of you, but it is imperative that you abide by each and every one of these admonishments. I realize that these are not easy, but they're very important. So please avoid talking with anyone about the case. You can tell people that you're on a jury in a trial that is in Arapahoe County in Division 201 of the Arapahoe County Justice Center. And that's all you can tell people. If anyone persists in trying to talk to you about the case, you need to have them call me, and then I'll deal with them. But this advisement applies to everyone, regardless of whether it's your significant other, another family member, a relative, a friend, a co-worker. It applies to everyone. Number three, please do not talk with any witnesses, parties, or attorneys about anything, not just about the case. You cannot talk to these folks about anything at all. And you may run into these folks in the hallway during the break. They're going to try to avoid making eye contact with you, or perhaps getting in the elevator with you, or holding the door open for you. They're not being rude, they're being careful. They know that this advisement is being given to you, and so they're attempting to be as careful as they can. Number four, to make sure that witnesses, parties, and attorneys do not talk to you, it is imperative that you wear your juror badge at all times and that it is visible to everyone around you when you're here on the courthouse premises. Your juror badge will also reduce the risk that people will talk about the case in your presence. If people see you coming and they see that you have a juror badge and they're talking about the case, they should stop talking about the case. If for some reason they do not, and you inadvertently happen to hear that they're talking about the case, please remove yourself from that location immediately. And if, despite your best efforts, you still hear something about the case, then let my staff know that you need to talk to me. Don't tell my staff what it is you need to talk to me about. Just say, hey, I need to talk to the judge. And by the way, if even despite your best efforts, something happens that violates one of these advisements, do not share it with the other jurors. So if you gain information about the case that you should not receive, do not share it with any other juror. What you should do in that situation is let my staff know that you need to talk to me about something. Another reason for requiring you to wear your juror badge is that, as you know, I have entered some orders in this case that relate to the media. And in order for the media to comply with my orders, they need to know who's a juror. And so if you have your juror badge on you at all times, it allows them to comply with my orders in terms of not talking to you about anything, not taking pictures of you, that kind of thing. So very important that you always have your juror badge on and that it's visible to everyone around you. Number 5, please do not talk to any members of the media about anything. And that applies to anything, not just the case. You cannot talk to any members of the media about anything. Number 6, you must not read, view, or listen to any news or media reports that may refer to this case. Because there is media coverage of this trial, you must be particularly vigilant while listening to the radio, watching TV, reading the newspaper, or using the internet. I understand that we all use the internet, or most of us use the internet, and you can do that, but you have to be incredibly careful. You have to be aware that something may come up on the internet about the case, and you need to be ready to exit that screen immediately. Same thing with the TV. Well, most of us watch TV. And same thing with the radio. Most of us listen to the radio. Some of us read the paper. All those things. It's okay for you to continue to do them. Just be very careful. Just be aware before you start doing whatever the activity may be, that you need to be ready to quickly change the channel or change the station, turn the page, exit the screen, whatever you need to do to avoid hearing any information about the case. I mentioned to you before that there are times during the break when the attorneys and I are having discussions about administrative issues, scheduling issues, or perhaps legal matters that you're not supposed to hear. The law requires that we have those discussions outside your presence. Now, there may be media coverage of some of those things, and you need to be very careful to avoid that type of information. Number 7, you cannot visit any locations that are mentioned in the case or conduct your own investigation outside the courtroom. There have been multiple locations mentioned in the trial. You cannot visit any of them for any reason. You can't go there for any reason. If there's a location that happens to be on your way home, then try to take a different route. If it is impossible for you to take a different route, then drive by it without making any observations, without sticking your head out the window and trying to see what you observe. That's the whole point, is to avoid that kind of conduct. The point is, we don't want you to do your investigation or to gather any information related to the case from an outside source. And the reason for that is that you need to make all decisions in this case based only on the evidence that is presented here in the courtroom and the instructions of law that I give you. You cannot start forming any opinions about the case until I tell you that you can start deliberating. So that means that you must keep an open mind throughout the trial. I've mentioned before that in our culture sometimes we get used to this idea of trying to figure out who's ahead now, or keeping track of who might have done something that makes them go ahead or somebody else go behind. You have to avoid that type of thinking. You have to keep an open mind throughout the trial, and you have to remember what I said to you multiple times during jury selection and even after that, and that is that the defendant is presumed innocent, and that presumption of innocence remains with him and must be given effect by the jury throughout the trial. By the way, going back to not acquiring any information about the case from outside sources, that includes consulting dictionaries, treatises, medical books, religious books in relation to the case. You may hear medical terms in this trial. It would be improper for you to look up those terms in a dictionary or a treatise or the internet, or you may hear technical terms. Same thing. You cannot go and do your own research and looking up those terms or trying to find out what those terms mean. That would be improper. That would be consulting an outside source in relation to the case. So you must avoid that. Number 9, please remember that neither sympathy nor prejudice for the prosecution or the defendant may affect any of your decisions in this case. And number 10, please remember that the attorneys have a job to do. They're required to make objections sometimes, and you should not hold it against them when they do so. nor should you hold it against them when they ask to approach the bench. They're doing their job. Similarly, please do not read anything into my rulings on any of the objections or requests that are made by counsel. I'm neutral in these proceedings, and I'm simply doing my best to apply the rules of law and other, including the rules of evidence, during the trial. That's my job. That's what I'm trying to do. So don't read anything into my rulings. Don't infer anything from my rulings. And you should certainly not be keeping track of how many objections or requests for one side or the other I'm granting or denying. That would be improper. Now, I've said before how incredibly important these advisements are. And I want to emphasize to you again, to remind you that we started this process in December when I ordered the jury summonses to go out. If any of you violates even a single one of these advisements, it could create major problems for the case. So please be very careful. If you are going to go back to work tomorrow, that's okay. You can do that. Just be extra careful. And to the extent that people already know that you're on the jury, then please tell them to avoid talking about the case or asking questions about the case in your presence, because you're not allowed to hear anything about the case. And to the extent that people already know at work that you're on the jury and you can elicit, or not elicit, but solicit the assistance of your supervisors so that people around you will not talk about the case or will avoid talking about the case, then that may be a good thing for you to do. Lastly, I just want to mention that it would be improper for any of you to think of these advisements in terms of, well, if I violate just a single one time, that's not going to make a big difference. You can't have that attitude. Please avoid that attitude. Your attitude should be each and every one of these is crucial and mandatory. The other attitude you should avoid is, well, who's going to know? Who's going to find out? Avoid that attitude as well, please. We rely on you and we trust you. There is a reason we take our time in selecting a jury. We know what I'm asking is not easy. And so you are on the jury because we believe you will follow all of these advisements and that you can do this. So we're trusting you to do that, all right? Now, with all of those advisements in mind, I want to wish you a happy Memorial Day weekend. So enjoy the weekend, and we'll see you back here, not on Monday. If you come on Monday, the courthouse will be closed. But on Tuesday morning at the usual time at 8:15 in the morning, all right? Thank you, folks. Thank you very much. I'll see you on Tuesday. The record should reflect that the jury has exited the courtroom. Please be seated, everyone. Just a brief record with respect to juror number 378. I wanted to indicate that I have been keeping an eye on her since we had the discussion with her earlier today, and I have noticed that she has been awake throughout and alert, and there were a few times this afternoon when I had to step off the bench because a witness was being questioned with respect to an exhibit, a physical exhibit, that the witness was using here in the courtroom. And so I needed to step down from the bench so that I could watch what was happening. And I noticed that this juror had her head down and appeared to have her eyes closed, but in fact was actually looking at her notebook and writing. And so it's very possible that when I noticed earlier that she had her head down, that perhaps that's what she was doing. That she told me that she has been awake throughout, and as I said, I have no reason to disbelieve her, but I wanted to make that observation for the record because I did notice that a couple of times this afternoon when I was standing next to the jury box and had a better view of the lower part of her body when her head is looking down. Is there anything we need to talk about at this time on behalf of the prosecution? Yes.
Your Honor, this seems like a good point to sort of give the court a status update. I know the court is interested in keeping us on track. We began presenting evidence in this case on April 28th. Thursday of next week marks May 28th. As of this point right now in the case, Your Honor, we have sworn 146 witnesses. We've taken testimony from 144. By our count, we have admitted 2,085 pieces of evidence exhibits, including 510 physical exhibits and about 1,575 photos and trajectory diagrams, and we have heard from 51 total victims thus far. We continue to track, I believe, the presentation of our evidence at that 2-month mark, which I calculate as, depending upon when you count it, Judge, June 27th or June 28th. We may be done prior to that, but I'm still tracking that as our end date.
Great. I am going to hold you to the estimate you gave me, which was 2 months. That's 8 weeks. I think that is sufficient time for you to present your case. So, but I appreciate you giving me a status report.
And I appreciate that, Your Honor. I still think, independent of the fact that this is our 16th day out of those weeks that we've presented, I still think we're going to get it done, and I don't anticipate asking the court to grant us more time.
Great. Mr. King?
Judge, with that in mind, I would just request that we be notified, and I'm not saying that we're not, but that we be notified as soon as possible if the case is going to, in fact, be shorter. I can tell the court that our case is getting shorter because a number of the people we were going to call as witnesses have already been called by the prosecution. We are now scheduling to begin our case on the 1st of July. So if it's going to take place earlier than that, we really need to know so that we can begin to schedule folks to come in, because I'm sure that the court is not going to be pleased if the prosecution rests their case and we don't have witnesses prepared to come in. But I'm informing the court and counsel that at this point we're prepared to move forward on the 1st of July.
All right, thank you. Give me a moment, please. I show that the end of 8 weeks from April 28, which is when the prosecution started its case, would be July 23rd. That's a Tuesday. June 23rd, excuse me, that's a Tuesday. And then June 26th would be the Friday of that week. So 8 weeks takes you to June 23. Even if there are some unexpected delays and we end up going a little bit beyond that, Mr. Brockler, when do you think it makes sense for the defense to plan to start its case?
Your Honor, I'd say that Monday after the 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th of June.
What are the chances that you'll be done with your case earlier than that Friday? Do you know? Is it?
I think we'll know more at the end of the next 2 weeks. I think we'll have a good sense of where we're at there. And the court should know, too, we reassess every Friday that we've had off, we go back and cull our list and reassess the presentation of evidence to see where we're at. And we're heading into a part of the case that I think that the court and everyone has anticipated, involving much more of the mental health issues. It's hard for us to gauge what the cross-examination looks like on that. I know what we think our presentation is going to take, so I think at the end of the next 2 weeks, we'll be able to come back to the court and do this exact same thing and give the court an assessment of what we think the likelihood is we'd be done before June 26th.
Mr. King, does that give you sufficient time if we wait till the end of 2 weeks from now to figure out when we think you can start putting on your case?
Yes, Judge. If the sooner we know, the better we can do. And we're not trying to be difficult. We're just trying to foretell the future here, and it's very difficult. We don't know what witnesses are going to be called by the prosecution until the Friday before, and then we know the following week. So we don't know what their plan is, and we're really in the dark. So at this point, I'll plan to move forward right after the 26th. The Monday right after the 26th, and we can try to be as flexible as we possibly can, but the earlier we can find out, the better.
Yeah, you should plan on starting your case no later than June 29th. That's the Monday, June 29th. But my preference would be to start your case sometime the week of June 22nd. But we'll see in 2 weeks where we are. I think, again, 8 weeks should be sufficient time for the prosecution to put on its case in its entirety. But we'll see what happens in the next 2 weeks. So for now, you can plan on sometime between June 23rd and June 29th, all right? And then within 2 weeks, it sounds like the prosecution will have a better feel for a more precise date as to when you can plan on starting.
Okay.
All right? All right, is there anything else on behalf of the people at this time, Mr. Brockler?
Your Honor, and I respect the court's time that it has given us, and I only plant these seeds in the off chance that we don't get done until what I perceive to be the 26th, which would be that 2-month mark, not the 8-week mark. But the court is right about the amount of time that we thought we'd have in terms of weeks. But only to make sure the record is clear, only 1 week thus far has been a full week of 5 days, and that is going to include next week as well. So while I still believe we are going to finish on the court schedule, I do plant the seed that we are only at, and not even 16 full days, 16 days out of those 4 weeks that we've had thus far. So my hope is we're still going to be done on the court's calendar, but it won't be 8 full weeks to present the case. And I'm very respectful of the court's amount of time it's given us thus far.
Yeah, we can keep going if you want, Mr. Brockler. I understand what you're saying, and what I'm telling you is I know this case pretty well now, and I've seen what evidence you presented. You can do this case in 8 weeks. This case should be done in 8 weeks, and I'm going to keep pushing you to do it in 8 weeks. So my preference would be that you finish on June 23rd. That is 8 weeks exactly from the time when you started presenting your evidence. Now, I understand that some of the weeks have been incomplete. I get it, but we planned on that all along. I mean, that was the schedule. That's been the schedule for a long time now. So everyone knew that when they gave me their estimate. So I'm going to keep pushing. And under the rules of evidence, I have the discretion to take control of the proceedings, and I am satisfied that 8 weeks is plenty of time for the prosecution to put on its case. And so that's my expectation. So we'll know more 2 weeks from now, all right? Now, on behalf of the defense, is there anything we need to talk about at this time?
Oh, Your Honor, thank you.
All right. Mr. Brockler, I did review those records from CU, and so we have them. I'm going to issue an order probably tomorrow, but we can give you copies and the defense copies. I'm not disclosing all of them. There are a couple of pages that we are not disclosing. But if you want to wait, my staff can give you guys copy, both sides copy, both parties copies, and then I'll issue an order related to it tomorrow.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Okay, have a good weekend. I'll see you folks on Tuesday. The court will be in recess.